My mother-in-law tried to take my house while I was in labor. So I added her name to the hospital's do not admit list 8 centimeters dilated. That's how far I was when my husband's mother, Carol, made her brazen attempt to steal my house. No joke, no exaggeration. In the space where I should have been breathing through contractions, my gaze fixed on sterile ceiling tiles, she stood in my living room. A moving truck, a hungry beast, idled at the curb, and she, clipboard in hand, announced to my front door camera that I wouldn't be needing the place once the baby arrived. My chest still burns, a scorching ember when I say it aloud. The sheer, chilling audacity. The cold, unbelievable nerve. Okay, deep breath. Let me tell you what led to that circus, because I promise none of it makes sense until suddenly it makes too much sense. I'm 32, born and raised in Ohio, about an hour outside Columbus. My husband, Ethan, 34, is an engineer with a knack for spreadsheets and an innate allergy to conflict. We've been married 4 years. We moved into this house, my little blue Craftsman with its familiar creaky porch and the steadfast maple in the front yard, 2 summers ago. I chose it for the kitchen window. The afternoon light hits the sink around 5 p.m., making the entire room glow like a quiet promise. Now, my mother-in-law, Carol, isn't some cartoon villain. She's a retired dental hygienist who bakes truly excellent lemon bars and will absolutely, without permission, rearrange your spice cabinet. She has a way of turning every sentence into an instruction. You should paint the nursery something neutral, she told me at 10 weeks pregnant, delivering it like a weather report. Gray is better than green, and you really should keep your last name hyphenated for professional reasons. She always smiles when she says these things, but it's the smile of someone signing for a package. Obligated, slightly bored, already mentally moving on. The first red flag fluttered subtly during our house hunt. Carol kept insisting we wait for a real home. A weird phrase that clung to me. This place is cute, she'd concede, but doesn't it feel temporary? Like a starter house. Ethan, who possesses an almost superhuman ability to diffuse women with strong opinions, would squeeze my hand and whisper, it's just her thing. She thinks bigger is safer. We bought the blue Craftsman anyway. Our joint down payment secured it, and the mortgage is in both our names. The deed lists us as joint tenants with survivorship rights. I only mention that because the paperwork, as you'll see, becomes a character in this story. Paper matters. When I got pregnant, Carol's volume knob turned up several notches. She needed to know our pediatrician, our stance on sleep training, our chosen stroller. Twice a week, she'd appear with a casserole and an accompanying critique. I'm a middle school counselor. I run an entire anti-bullying program with a team of 3 and a budget of $12. Hard conversations aren't new to me. Yet, I kept telling myself this was normal for a first-time grandma, that it was merely enthusiasm. Enthusiasm that shows up unannounced and rearranges your dishwasher. Enthusiasm that accidentally takes your spare house key in case of emergencies and never returns it. Then, late in my 3rd trimester, she sat at my kitchen table, a manila folder open before her like a tax accountant. Okay, she chirped, so here's how this is going to work. I remember looking out at the maple tree, thinking, asterisk please, not now, not another system. Asterisk, she slid a piece of paper towards me. It's a temporary guardianship form, she explained. Just for the birth week, in case you're too out of it to make decisions. Who wants to be signing documents between contractions, right? She'd highlighted areas in neon yellow. Then, flipping a page, she continued, and this is a housekeeping plan. The movers can bring your essentials to our house, because you'll need to recover where there are more hands. We'll set up the nursery in the guest room. I already ordered a crib. I didn't shout. I'm proud of that. I just said, no, a simple, gentle no, like putting a lid back on a candle. We're going home after the hospital. To our home, where our nursery already is. Carol blinked, as if I'd mispronounced a word. She glanced at Ethan, searching for backup. And he did that thing again. Diffused, deflected, a half-smile. Mom, he said, we're set. We appreciate your help, but we've got it. Carol folded the papers, her receptionist's smile still in place. Of course, she said, if you change your mind. That night, I changed the code on our smart lock. Carol was offended. She didn't say so directly. She's too Midwestern for direct. But I could feel it. The lemon bars stopped coming. The texts grew shorter. We tried to brush it off. My due date crept closer. I washed the tiny onesies, lining them up like a calendar of hope. Labor began on a Tuesday, slow and stubborn. By midnight, we timed contractions. By 2 a.m., we were in triage. My hospital room smelled of antiseptic and ice chips. My nurse was a saint, her wrist tattooed with peonies. They checked me in, strapped on monitors, and gave me the pep talk. Ethan set up our little speaker, playing a Motown playlist, because I wanted to give birth like a woman in a 1970s movie, strong, messy, held together by music. At 4 in the morning, my OB popped her head in, progressing. I entered that place women only talk about in metaphors, the tunnel where the world shrinks to just breath and seconds. Somewhere in there, Ethan whispered, "You're doing it." And I wanted to tell him, no, something else is doing it through me. Like when the ocean pushes you and you think you're swimming, but you're really just saying yes to the tide. Around 6, as monitors beeped and the sunrise turned the blinds silver, my phone buzzed on the tray table. Ethan grabbed it before I could. We had a rule: no family group chat until after the baby arrived. He looked at the screen, frowned, then looked at me with a face he reserved for bad news about the car. "It's the doorbell camera," he said. I reached for the phone, hitting live view. There she was, Carol, in my front yard, quilted vest, holding a clipboard. Behind her, the moving truck idled at the curb. 2 guys in branded sweatshirts jogged up my porch steps with flat boxes. My heart tried to punch its way out of my body. The date. The timestamp. The ridiculous dawn. She was talking to the camera like it was a person. "Hi, sweetie," she said, tilting her head. "You're not home." I know. I'm just going to get a few things set up for when you bring the baby to our house. We'll need the bassinet, the diaper cart, and I might take the glider because the guest room is a bit small." She giggled, as if sharing a cute secret. "I'll leave the couch." I never knew anger could be so clear. I always thought it was red and hot, but could be cold as ballast, steadying you. I hit the intercom button. "Do not go inside," I said. My voice was calm, creaky like a door that still works. Carol's smile pivoted, still on her face, but different now, like realizing a painting is a forgery. "Oh, honey," she cooed. "You're busy? You don't need to worry about any of this." "Do not go inside," I repeated. "The police will be there in 5 minutes." I didn't know if that was true, but I needed it to be. She blinked. The movers glanced at each other, as if wondering, is this part of the job? Ethan pulled out his phone, called our neighbor Mr. Rodriguez, a retired firefighter with the patience of a saint and the biceps of a Marvel character. "Hey," Ethan said, breathless. "Carol's there with movers. Can you?" He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Mr. Rodriguez said, "On it," and hung up. My nurse, God bless her, had quietly stepped closer. "Do I need to get security involved?" she whispered. I nodded, a contraction rising like a city on the horizon. She pressed a button. 30 seconds later, a hospital security officer stood in the doorway, wide stance, calm eyes. "What do you need?" he asked. And I realized the hospital was my house right now. "I need the locks here," I said. "Can you add my mother-in-law's name to a do not admit list? She's not allowed in this room. Not during labor. Not after." He nodded, as if he'd waited his whole career for someone to ask exactly that. "What's the name?" he asked. I spelled it, a contraction breaking me open mid-letters. He wrote it down. "Consider handled." I wanted to kiss his badge. On the phone screen, Mr. Rodriguez appeared on my porch, flannel shirt, pajama pants, his gray hair standing up like he'd been struck by lightning. He planted himself between the movers and my door, and said in a voice that vibrated through the pixels, "No one goes in this house without the homeowner present. Period." One of the movers, a kid no older than 20, held up his hands. "Sir, we were just told—" "You were told incorrectly," Mr. Rodriguez said, pointing to the camera. "The homeowner is saying no. That's the homeowner." He jabbed his finger at the lens like he was poking Carol right in the denial. Carol pivoted to sweetness again. "We're just trying to help," she sang. "This whole thing is too much for them." Then she made the mistake of adding, This house was never meant to be permanent. That set something on fire inside me. I don't know if you've ever felt a contraction and righteous fury at the same time, but the combination could power a small city. "Get away from my door," I said, my voice low, raw. "You will not enter my home. You will not take my baby's things. You will not decide where I recover." The nurse squeezed my shoulder. "Breathe," she said softly, but I knew she also meant, "Get it all out." Sirens chirped down the block. Columbus police. Carol's face finally cracked. It was like she suddenly remembered laws were real. She stepped back. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, straightening her vest with quick, embarrassed hands. She told the movers to wait. Then she looked into the camera and said, her voice a frozen river, "We'll talk about this when you're in your right mind." I ended the feed. Ethan kissed my forehead, a silent apology. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have changed the lock code sooner. I should have dealt with this weeks ago." A contraction rolled in. I grabbed his wrist and breathed. And then my anger solidified into a kind of focus I'd never known. If this was the energy Carol thought she could outrun, she should have brought running shoes. Our baby Nora arrived at 10:13 a.m. with a howl that sounded like my grandmother's laugh. She was perfect. She smelled like warm bread and brand new skin. The nurse laid her on my chest, and I cried from some deep river that had been waiting years to find its ocean. For an hour, it was just us. The world reduced to 3. The peony-tattooed nurse brought me juice, her whole face smiling. The security officer stepped back in and gave us a discreet thumbs up. "Name's Carol," he asked. "Yeah," I said, half laughing. "She's taken care of," he said. "Our desk is briefed. No one gets by. We sent a single text to the family group chat. Asterisk, she's here. Healthy. We're in love. Please give us 24 hours before visiting." Asterisk, Carol sent a heart emoji. Then, "I'm coming tonight." I didn't respond. At noon, hospital social work stopped by at my nurse's request. Apparently, when you say, "Do not admit my mother-in-law," the staff checks in. I told the social worker everything, from the guardianship form to the moving truck. She nodded slowly, the way professionals file facts into boxes. "You did exactly the right things," she said. "We can add a note to your chart and security list. We can also connect you with legal resources if you want to file a formal no trespass order for your home. Paper has power." I told you the paper would become a character. That evening, as the sky turned soft, Ethan walked down to the hospital chapel and called his mother. I didn't ask him to, and I didn't stop him. He was gone for half an hour. When he returned, he looked like a man who'd finally dropped a heavy backpack he'd been pretending wasn't there. She said she was only doing what any sane mother would do, he told me, tracing the edge of the bassinet like he was underlining a sentence. I told her she crossed a legal line and a moral one. I told her we need space, and I told her this house is ours. He used those words, ours. He looked at me then, as if checking if he'd passed a test. I didn't make him guess. I pulled him in and said, "Thank you." We went home the next afternoon. The maple tree had dropped a confetti of leaves on the walkway, and Mr. Rodriguez had swept our porch. A note was folded under a magnet on the fridge. "Got your back. Call me if anything looks off." He'd also, I later noticed, screwed in a sturdier strike plate on the front door. That man is a community watch program, all by himself. Inside, the house felt tense. Not messy, not violated exactly, but tense, like the air after lightning. I checked the nursery first. Everything was there. My glider in the corner like a patient friend, the diaper caddy lined up, the tiny socks paired. I stood in the doorway and let my eyes water just a little. We put Nora down for a nap in the bassinet we'd chosen. In the room, we'd painted a shade of pale green Carol would have hated on principle. That evening, our doorbell rang. Not Carol, my own mom, who lives 40 minutes away and has mastered the art of loving without rearranging furniture. She brought soup and a cheap bouquet that made the kitchen smell like summer. She held Nora like an apology to every baby she'd ever held less gently. She didn't touch a single drawer. The next morning, the first text from Carol pinged in. "How is the baby? Are you up for chat?" I typed, then erased, then typed again. "We need a week," I sent. Asterisk finally. "No visits. We'll let you know when we're ready." Asterisk a bubble appeared, then nothing. Then a long paragraph. Asterisk, "This is outrageous." You're shutting me out. After all I've done, I don't even get to see my granddaughter. Asterisk, I read it 3 times. I didn't respond. On day 3, a letter arrived in our mailbox. Actual paper. Typed. Carol's signature at the bottom in ballpoint blue. It said, brace yourself, that she consulted an attorney, that a judge could recognize de facto grandparent rights if the parents were acting irrationally, that she was concerned about Nora's welfare in a home unfit for long-term family life, which I guess meant a craftsman with a creaky porch and a lot of heart. My hand shook. Ethan read the letter, his jaw clenched so hard I could see a muscle jump like a heartbeat. We called the number the hospital social worker had written on a sticky note, a family law clinic that helps new parents navigate restraining orders and overinvolved relatives. The attorney there, a woman who sounded like she drank her coffee black and sued people before breakfast, said she can file whatever she wants. In Ohio, grandparents' rights are limited and don't trump the parents' decisions unless there's neglect. You've done nothing wrong. In fact, you've documented her showing up with movers. You have a doorbell video. Good. We're going to get that backed up. Save every text. I believed her because she was calm. Paper has power, she said. Okay, I could learn to speak paper. The next week stretched like taffy. We learned how to feed a baby who grunted like a baby goat. We learned the specific whimper that meant diaper versus the one that meant gas. We slept in 90-minute increments and high-fived over burps. And every day, Carol sent a message. She alternated between sweet and scolding, like a broken sprinkler. Spray, stop, spray. On day 5, I'm sorry if I overstepped. On day 6, your behavior is dangerous. On day 7, she sent a voice memo I couldn't play without shaking. I'm coming by today to see my granddaughter. And that's that. I sent her 3 sentences. Asterisk, do not come to our house uninvited. We are not receiving visitors. Trying to enter will result in a no trespass order. Asterisk then, with the attorney's help, we filed the no trespass order anyway. We added the hospital incident, the moving truck, the letter. We attached stills from the doorbell video. Carol on the porch, hand on the doorknob. The moving truck a distant thread on wheels. Paper power. At 2 p.m., as if she'd set a timer, Carol's car pulled up. She marched to the door, carrying a gift bag with tissue paper like a white flag that somehow also felt like a spear. Before she could knock, Mr. Rodriguez stepped out of his house again. God, I love that man. He stood 20 feet away with his phone out. Not filming, just there, a witness with forearms that could break a watermelon. I opened the door, but kept the storm door closed. You can leave the bag on the porch, I said. We're not having visitors. She made a show of peering past me, like she might catch a glimpse of the baby and argue. She'd already seen her. So what's the harm in coming in? This is absurd, she said, already escalating. The house is too small. You're exhausted. Look at you. You can't even stand up straight. I felt that old anger click back into place. Carol, I said, and my voice surprised me. It carried the weight of all those nights feeding at 2 a.m., all those contractions I'd breathed through, all the paper building a fort around our life. You tried to take my baby's things from my house while I was in labor. You brought a moving truck to our front door. You told me I wasn't in my right mind. You sent a letter threatening court. I'm not discussing whether we need help or if our house is real enough. I'm telling you the rules. You will not come to our home uninvited. You will not undermine me as Nora's mother. And if you can't do that, you will not see us. For a second, the part of Carol that bakes lemon bars showed up. Her eyes actually filled. But then I watched it happen. She put the mask back on. I'm disappointed in you, she said, like she was grading a math test. Your behavior is cruel. The sheriff's car rolled up behind her, like the universe saying, we're doing consequences today. The deputy got out, adjusted his belt, approached with polite authority. He'd been the one to process our no trespass order that morning. Ma'am, he said to Carol, I'm going to ask you to leave this property. You've been served notice. You're officially not permitted to be here without an invitation. Carol opened her mouth, then closed it. She placed the gift bag on the porch with painstaking care, as if she wanted credit for gentleness. Then she walked back to her car and drove away. We stood in the doorway for a long time afterward. Me, Ethan, and Mr. Rodriguez. 3 people who'd just successfully protected a small island from a storm. I turned to Ethan. If she files anything, we'll respond, I said, feeling like I'd grown a second spine. He nodded. Together, he said. We do this together. The following week, Carol's sister, my husband's aunt, called me. I don't want to get in the middle, Aunt Beth said, which is always the thing said by people already in the middle. But I think you should know Carol's told the extended family that you've had postpartum psychosis and that you're making dangerous decisions. I sat down hard on the bottom stair, Nora warm against my chest in the sling. I felt 2 feelings at once, used to it and newly shocked. I'm fine, I said, breathing through the sting. My OB screened me yesterday. I'm tired, and I'm protective of my baby. That's all. Aunt Beth was quiet for a second, then said, I figured as much. I told her she needs to drop it. I called my OB's office and asked them to print a note for me to keep on file. Asterisk, no signs of postpartum mood disorder. Patient is coping appropriately. Seek help if symptoms arise. Asterisk, not because I plan to wave it around, but because sometimes you need to know that truth can sit on paper too, not just threats. We didn't hear from Carol for 3 weeks after the sheriff's visit. The quiet was loud. Then, the week before Thanksgiving, Ethan got an email. It was forwarded from Carol to him, then to me, in that clumsy way that reveals more than it hides. Subject line, estate planning update. The body. Given your recent volatility, your father and I have had to revisit our will. It's imperative that Nora be raised in a stable environment. If, God forbid, something happens to you, we have identified guardians who would provide that stability. She named, of course, herself and her husband. Subtext, obey, or we control your legacy. Ethan typed and erased for 15 minutes. Then he wrote exactly 1 sentence. Please remove me from future communications about your will and do not use potential inheritance or guardianship as leverage. He CC'd our attorney. He hit send. Then he walked into the nursery where I was humming to Nora and wrapped his arms around both of us like a promise. Thanksgiving came with its own family landmines. We decided to stay home. My mom brought over a turkey breast and mashed potatoes, and we ate with the football game low on TV, Nora asleep in the bassinet, a little pilgrim with milk on her breath. We FaceTimed with Ethan's cousin Sam and his wife, who are kinder than anyone needs to be. We love you guys, Sam said. We're around if you need a safe place. In this country, we build families like quilts. Sometimes the square that keeps you warm comes from a friend's old shirt. And then, this is the part that still feels like a movie. The doorbell rang again. I checked the camera, bracing for Carol. It wasn't her. It was the 2 movers from that morning in September. The kids in branded sweatshirts. They were sheepish, hands jammed in their pockets. We're sorry to bother you, one of them said, staring at the porch railing. We felt, after that day, we just didn't feel right about it. We have something for you. He lifted a small box out of a paper bag. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was my grandmother's ceramic music box. It plays Blue Skies. I keep it on the shelf in the nursery, except that week, as I later realized, it hadn't been where I left it. The older lady, she stuck in her tote bag. The kid admitted, cheeks pink. We told her we forgot something on the truck and grabbed it back when she wasn't looking. We kept it at the office. Our boss said not to get involved, but he shrugged. I swallowed around the lump in my throat. Thank you. I managed voice wobbly. Thank you so much. I wrote their boss a review that would make a grown man cry. I may have also slipped the kids some cash in a Christmas card, because sometimes you reward the small rebellions. In December, a card arrived from Carol. On the front, a snowman held a mug that said, World's Best Grandma. Inside, a photo of Carol and her husband in matching sweaters, smiling in front of a tree. No picture of Nora, obviously, which I'm sure pained her in a way she'd never admit. The message was handwritten, but felt rehearsed. I hope we can start fresh in the new year. Families forgive. Love, Mom. I sat on the mantel and stared at it for a long time. Forgiveness is important, yes, but forgiveness without boundaries is just permission. I wasn't ready to hand that out like stocking stuffers. January brought flu season and more sleepless nights. It also brought a kind of peace The ordinary kind you don't notice until it's threatened. I learned to eat lukewarm oatmeal and drink coffee in sips. Ethan and I fought about dumb things, like whose turn it was to scrub the bottles, and then cried and made up because everything mattered and nothing did. We were a family in a little blue house with a paper fort around it. In February, our attorney called. "Just so you're in the loop," she said, "I spoke with the counsel who advised your mother-in-law." I sent him the doorbell footage, the sheriff's report, the text messages. He advised her to drop the guardianship angle and the grandparent rights nonsense. I doubt you'll hear more about court. I leaned against the washing machine and let relief thud through me like a heartbeat. Paper had done its job. We didn't slam a door in Carol's face forever. We cracked a window and asked her to learn how to use a screen. In March, we invited her to meet us at a coffee shop halfway between our houses, a public place with boundaries that could be seen. Ethan held Nora while I said calmly, clearly, "Here's how this works. Visits are scheduled. You don't arrive at our home unannounced. You don't undermine decisions with back-channel gifts or comments about how we should do things. You respect the no trespass order and hospital boundaries in the future. If you can agree to these rules, we can try. If you can't, we're done." Carol dabbed her eyes with a napkin. She nodded. She didn't apologize for the moving truck, but later, in a parking lot, she did look at Nora with a softness that made my chest ache. People are complicated. Control is a habit. Habits can be unlearned if the person actually wants to. I'm not here to tell you everything wrapped up in a bow. Sometimes Carol sends advice disguised as questions, and I send back silence disguised as busyness. Sometimes she slips and calls the house temporary, and Ethan says, very gently but firmly, "Our home." But last week she came over for a scheduled hour and brought lemon bars. She left them on the counter and didn't rearrange the dishwasher. When she left, she looked back at the porch like she was trying to memorize it. And for the first time, I hope she would. If you're listening to this and your stomach is tight because you recognize the shape of it, the way a relative can build a story in their head where your life is just a chapter they edit, hear me. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep anybody warm. Not even family. Especially not family who only love you as long as you agree. The night after the movers brought me back my music box, I wound it and let it plink out blue skies while I rocked Nora. The maple leaves outside were gone by then, the branches bare, the porch light haloing the cold. I looked around my kitchen, at the sink with the late afternoon glow, at the magnet on the fridge holding Mr. Rodriguez's note, at the battered wooden table where Carol once spread out her guardianship forms like they were a recipe. I felt tired to my bones and ridiculously alive. I kissed Nora's head and whispered into her soft hair, "This is our house. We are your parents. We'll keep you safe." And then I went to the front door, pressed my palm to the deadbolt, and turned it with a click that sounded to me not like locking anyone out, but like locking us in. Safe together.